This is Hannibal back here from the HannibalTV.com as I got some fluff on my face with a daily wrestling news update for you. Apparently, WWE is following Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis' lead. They want the Janelle Grant lawsuit to be moved to arbitration as I guess according to the settlement agreement, if there was any issues with the settlement, it was supposed to be taken up in arbitration. So in the end, you got to follow the paperwork and do things in the proper form. So I would imagine it probably will get moved to arbitration. As far as Ric Flair, apparently the $1,000 tip that he's on camera saying that he was going to give because he called one of the bartenders Nicholas Dickhead, a nut job, a pussy, and a dipshit, and he told them to kiss his ass. Apparently, he wanted to give $1,000 tip, and they did not run the tip, according to Dave Meltzer. So in the end, at first he claimed he spent 1,500. Then he claimed he spent 2,000 on food and $1,000 tip. Now, according to Meltzer, they didn't run the tip because he wasn't trying to give it in cash. He was trying to get them to run it. He also claimed that he didn't curse, which obviously he's on tape cursing. And as far as looking at the guy through the crack in the stall, which is funny because it wasn't a man. It wasn't the man that called him a peeping Tom that he was staring at. It was one of the other employees who I guess the man had told that Flair was looking through the crack in the stall, which Flair says he could see that the guy was texting in the stall, so clearly he was. And then he claims what set him off was to be called a peeping Tom and a creep, which it sounds like his temper tantrum was already beginning in the bathroom, but good luck to him. Hopefully somebody gets him into rehab. Apparently Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, their most recent AEW contract is the highest amount anyone has ever got as a tag team in wrestling. Uh, I guess they have the same agent that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall had, and their AEW contract is far more than Nash and Scott Hall, the outsiders, had. So AEW is just throwing around money like there's no tomorrow. USA is getting Raw for 25 million, as I mentioned yesterday. Apparently, the this 25 million is a very good deal for them. Speaking of AEW, Dynamite Kid's nephew, really small, skinny guy, Thomas Billington, will be appearing on Collision this week. I believe they're taping it in Vancouver. As far as the UFC concussions lawsuit, the average amount that the fighter are going to get in the settlement is about $140,000. With the settlement being 335 million, there was a lot of fighters involved. There's no changes to the way that UFC does business coming out of that lawsuit. UFC is hardly doing events anymore that don't pay site fees. So, for instance, they came to Ottawa twice, and like other than the pay-per-views, they're doing most of their shows from the Apex, which is part of a building that they own. And I guess even though they could make money by touring, it just might not be worth it to them when they don't have to really do any setup at all, holding stuff at the Apex. And if they're getting millions of dollars in site fees, then they'll go somewhere. Then they'll also charge a lot for ticket prices and make millions and millions and millions in ticket prices. But I guess it's just not worth it to them to do fight nights traveling around like they used to. Um, and they apparently, according to Dave Meltzer, they underpay talent huge. And we have seen that boxers make a lot more than fighters, which is why a lot of fighters are doing these gimmick boxing matches and leaving UFC to do that, such as Francis Ngannou. And even though these boxing matches are getting almost no press and nobody hears about them, because they're in places like Saudi Arabia, these guys are making a fortune out of it. As far as the Saudi Arabia deals that Vince McMahon initially set up, apparently Nick Khan is dealing with the WWE side of Saudi Arabia, and Dana White is dealing with the UFC side of Saudi Arabia. They are looking to do both a fight night and a pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia, which they would probably get over 50 million to do a pay-per-view there. And apparently WWE is also looking for a bigger Saudi Arabia payday. They get about 40 or 50 million a show there now for their lower end pay-per-views, but they're looking at maybe doing one of the the top pay-per-views like Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, or SummerSlam, maybe in Saudi Arabia at some point for a much larger fee, which there is a lot less overall interest when they do these pay-per-views in places like France and Saudi Arabia and Australia. As we saw the Backlash pay-per-view, there was very little interest in it outside of France. It didn't do too well in the Google searches or viewership. It did very well in local ticket sales, and they got a huge site fee for it, but they'd rather, like, get a huge site fee and put on these lower shows that don't get as much interest from places outside where they're taking place because they don't care anymore. They get flat money from Peacock for the pay-per-views. It doesn't matter how many people watch. When they go to Netflix, they don't need to worry about pay-per-view buys either. And then they're getting millions of dollars to bring these events to places, and they're charging a fortune. Like the average ticket price for France was $300 just because WWE rarely comes there. And it's good. I guess fans are travel to go and from the local area, and they just haven't seen it so much that it's special to them. So they're willing to pay those ridiculous fees for fairly low quality cards overall. Anyways, guys, have a great afternoon.